Hello and welcome to My Emotional Armor, the podcast where we discuss the effects of covert narcissistic parenting. I am your host, Cindy Koo, a survivor and robot warrior here to share the ways emotional armor can help you heal, stay safe, and regain your sense of self. Hey everyone, I'm back. I know I disappeared for a bit, but please know that I have seen your feedback and I love it and am continuing to work on topics to discuss here. My boyfriend and I were apart for 7 months due to COVID, so I took a bit of time off to spend with him. But I'm happy to say I'm here now and currently recording solo from a little beach town in California called Ventura. And I thank you all for returning and sticking with me. Now, on the topic of solo time, I would say survivors of covert narcissism actually need these moments of solitude more than most because you've been conditioned to constantly survey the needs of your CNP. So while you recognize the need for human connection and find people enjoyable, you also find them exhausting. And this is the crux of what I want to discuss today, which is the relationship between being raised by a covert narcissist and the anxious attachment style. So first of all, what are attachment styles? To summarize, this is rooted in attachment theory, which is a psychological theory that analyzes how we connected with our parents or primary caregivers throughout childhood. It supposes that we are grouped into 4 main attachment styles. And these are fearful avoidant, anxious preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, and secure. Those of us raised by covert narcissists typically have high levels of both anxiety and empathy, which means you are prone to develop the anxious preoccupied attachment style. The empathy comes from continually monitoring the needs and responses of your CNP. Now, it's good to be receptive to how things affect people and try to make sense of what others may be feeling, but you as a child learn to walk on eggshells early. This grew into both a blessing, which is empathy, and a curse, which is the anxiety. Because your CNP was so inconsistent, nothing made sense. 1 minute they're praising you, the next they're belittling you. They'll say you're smart, but chastise you when you speak your mind. They'll say they're proud of you, but that you're weak and wouldn't be where you are without them. It's all very covert, almost undetectable. In essence, you've been utterly confused for your entire childhood. For you, nothing has made sense from day one. Combine all this mixed messaging with the covert narcissist's usual gaslighting tricks, and it's no wonder the confused child grows up into an anxious, preoccupied adult. Now, this is, of course, not a 100% one-to-one correlation. So after listening to this episode, I suggest you also research the other attachment styles and see what resonates with you. And as we'll discuss later, you will definitely notice traits of other attachment styles in you, so it can be helpful to get a broad overall overview. A really good source is the Personal Development School. And they have a quiz that you can take and tons of informative videos, which I will link to in the show notes. But if you know or have an inkling that you are anxiously attached, keep listening. I'd like to get into how an upbringing with a CNP results in the anxious attachment style. And the way I'm going to do this is by exploring the other styles and comparing them with your childhood in the context of covert narcissism. So the first is the fearful avoidant attachment style. And this one typically arises out of more overt and grandiose types of narcissistic abuse. It could have been physical or consisted of more straightforward verbal attacks. That's why this results in a more direct fear, as interactions were more painful than anything. But for you, as a survivor of covert narcissistic abuse, you likely felt a mix of love and pain from your parent, resulting in confusion and anxiety as you got older. Now, it's typical for a CNP to be a very good parent when the child is small. As an infant or toddler, your needs are primarily physical, and the CNP actually feeds off being needed by you. They also derive satisfaction from the image they project as the superstar mother or father. However, once you start to develop a more complex range of emotions, the CNP is simply not equipped to handle this. And that's when the invalidation starts. Any negative emotion that you experience that could reflect badly on them simply does not exist in their eyes. For example, let's say your parents divorced and you start to feel some loss and or sadness about it. Both very natural feelings. Your covert narcissistic parent is likely to deny those feelings because in his or her eyes, your sadness is a reflection of their actions in the divorce. Really though, you have a right to feel anything and everything. With a CNP though, their fragile ego can't take it. So instead of acknowledging that the divorce, something they were a part of, had an adverse effect on you, they deny the effect altogether. Or what also happens is they blame their ex-spouse entirely and play innocent victims. In addition to your growing range of emotions, the other big disconnect happens when you gain independence and start to forge your own path in life. The CNP takes this as a personal affront because after all they've done for you, you owe them your life, right? No, that's not how it works. Life is not supposed to be a transaction, but you can bet that's how they see it. So unlike the fearful avoidant attachment style, who was legitimately scared of their parent the majority of the time, you lived instead with these juxtapositions of safety versus danger. Safety because they did provide for you, but danger when they would enter a narcissistic rage. You also experienced gratitude versus resentment. You were thankful and probably are thankful for all they've done, but you likely feel indebted your whole life. And you also have the conflicting juxtaposition of love versus guilt. You love your parent and they love you, but whenever you disagree or try to live your life, you've been conditioned to feel guilty. I'm going to end this episode here today, but I'll be releasing part 2 immediately afterwards. You won't have to wait a whole week or anything. And the reason this is a 2-parter is because I think it's important to flesh this topic out thoroughly because attachment theory heavily informs our adult romantic relationships. I truly believe the more you know, the more you notice your own behavior and can decide which ones are rooted in an unhealthy attachment and which ones are conscious decisions. So in part 2, we'll pick back up with the remaining 2 attachment styles, dismissive avoidant and secure. Just as we did with the fearful avoidant style in this episode, we'll compare it to the anxious one in the context of covert narcissism. But before I leave you guys, I want to shout out and thank Katie, a listener from Chicago who recently left an incredibly kind and heartfelt comment. She, like so many of us, went searching on YouTube and iTunes for information on covert narcissism and eventually wound up here at My Emotional Armor. I am so grateful for her words because, as you all know, invalidation is something that CNP survivors deal with all the time, even well into our healing process. Each time we realize that there are more of us out there, the more our stories are validated. So again, thank you, Katie, and thank you to all the listeners out there. Together is the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of My Emotional Armor. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. And if you have any topics you'd like to hear about on the show, please fill out the contact form online at myemotionalarmor.com. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay safe and armored up.